Midsummer Observing Reflections with Mike O'Brien on episode 494 of the Actual Astronomy Podcast. I'm Chris, and joining me is Shane. We are amateur astronomers who love looking up at the night sky, and this podcast is for everyone who enjoys going out under the stars. So today we have our friend Mike O'Brien joining us again. It's been a while, Mike, but I think you've been on a few times in the past.
At least once.
At least once. At least once. I thought you were on a couple times anyway, but I can't remember now. It was a
Well,
couple
I
years
think,
ago.
we probably talk in between your podcasts, and there's, some, I don't know, we share some information that maybe makes it onto the podcast, but even though I may not actually be there in person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I guess you'd be, I would say probably, and Shane, Mike's probably about the, in many ways, greatest influence on the podcast. If for any other reason than I think, Mike, you were just about the only person listening to the first few episodes.
That's right.
Well, I think you got lots of listeners now. I don't know how you guys actually count it, but you're over 400 in now, so the word of mouth has actually spread, I think, and a lot more people listen to podcasts these days too. So
Yeah, but it's funny because as we're doing the podcast, I think assumptions get made by listeners as a listener would. One is that we mostly observe with refractors, which is true to a certain extent. If I'm observing alone, yes, I mostly observe with refractors, and Shane, I think you're similar. But then, of course, when we observe with Mike, which is sort of frequently enough, we probably mostly observe with his 12-inch reflector. I think that 12-inch reflector really complements the refractors, don't you, Shane?
Yeah, it's really nice to switch from, the wider field refractors to the big aperture that the 12-inch brings in. And when I'm looking at a globular in the 4-inch refractor, it's barely stellar. And then go to Mike's 12-inch and it's like, holy cow, you can start counting stars with direct vision. So yeah, love the diversity when the Dob comes out. It's fun.
yeah, that
Yeah.
that scope works pretty well. It's certainly subject to the conditions of the sky and the atmosphere and all that. But you know, if it's set up properly and collimated, and it's such a solid scope. And I don't know, I don't clean the mirror that often, but I do keep it clean. And plus the fact that it gets packed away inside these protective bags that zip up
Mm.
and seal off any of the elements, that certainly helps to keep the optics clean too. Yeah.
And what is it, Mike? It's a 12-inch or a 305 millimeter
Yeah.
Orion. Is it f4.9?
I think it's an F5. It's 1500 millimeter focal length and
Okay.
a 300 millimeter objective mirror.
And
So
and you use paracord in that most of the time. I
yeah, I
think
do.
paracord too. Yeah.
Yeah, and the paracord actually acts as a somewhat of has a Barlow effect of 1.15.
Yeah.
So it changes the focal length from 1500 to 17 and a quarter. So I'll tell you about, I don't know where you want to start, but I'll tell you about how I observed on Thursday night this just recently. And all I used was a 30 millimeter APM UFF, which gave me about 57 power. Okay,
Yeah.
and the only other eyepiece I think I put in was the 13 millimeter Teleview Ethos, which gave me 132 power. So I just switched
Mhm.
between 57 and 132. The
And
sky
where were you?
condition. Oh,
Yeah. So
I was out.
yeah, where were you observing it?
I was about 2 hours northwest of Regina, at Douglas Provincial Park, which is near Diefenbaker Lake and Elbow, Saskatchewan. It's pretty dark out there. Like if you look at the light pollution map, it's in a really good dark place. Um, and we were just at a campsite there. I think we were out there for about 10 days altogether, and
Nice.
we're we were in one campsite for the first 5 nights, and then we switched to another campsite for the other 5 nights, because those first 5 nights, we were doing things like biking and hiking and a little paddling on the lake. And of course, I don't know, the weather wasn't that good, and the sky wasn't, I think the moon was still up, or even like the perpetual twilight was persisting a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But at the other site, the second site that I had booked, it is pretty ideal for astronomy. There's not a lot of trees around it. It's kind of like wide open. And then, so I was just waiting for a good night while we were there.
Yeah.
And so finally a good night did come, and that location is at 51 degrees north and 106 degrees west latitude. So it's a little bit further north from here, but not much.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it was a good night. I set up I just put my 15 by 50 binocs on a tripod, actually before it got dark, because the sky was looking really good. And
Yeah.
I thought, I'm gonna point my binoculars towards Arcturus, see if I can spot it in the lit
Wow.
sky. And
Yeah.
of course, I had seen it a couple of nights before. I knew approximately where it was, and I could see it in the binoculars. I couldn't see it naked eye. And then from there, I don't know, I set up the scope a couple hours later, because it takes a long time to get dark at this time of year.
Yeah.
It's not dark until well after 11, more like closer to midnight.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you could even see on those photos I sent how bright the sky still was at 11 o'clock. It looked darkish, but anyway, it's hanging
Yeah.
around. So you set up the 12-inch, and then what did you start your observing session with? And what were you looking at, and how long did you go?
Yeah, I started just looking at the bright stars, because that's all that was really visible at first, and then I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to move around to the sky from west to east. I didn't get too much to the overheads where like Cygnus was or anything like that, and I didn't really observe a whole lot of objects, but I thought I'd start over. I went to Lyra, and just to test the optics of the telescope by putting it on the double double, and so pretty that triangle of Lyra, that small triangle, which is Vega, Epsilon, and Eta Lyra, just barely fit in the field of view of the 30 millimeter. So about, I don't know, I think it's about 1.5 degrees, of actual field. And so I put it on Epsilon, and I could see, that double is quite a wide double, but the two individual doubles are actually very, very close together, and not that easy to see at 60 power, but at 132 power, you can see the separation, there's,
Yeah.
and it was good, I could
How about color? Did you see any color in them?
No, I couldn't really see much for color.
Are they colored stars?
I think they're mostly white, those.
Yeah, I thought they were white, but I've never really not looked for color, but I don't remember color ever standing out in the double double.
Yeah. I think there's a very slight difference in the brightness, but even the brightness is pretty close. But I think what's interesting about that double double is just the perpendicular angle of the orientation of each of those doubles, and one's like on a 90 degree and one's on a 180. So they're unmistakable once you see the evidence of that. Then I moved down to Eta, which is another double. It's not a real close double, but it's quite a variance in the brightness of those two stars. And then over to Delta, and I think in the magazine in Sky and Telescope there was a little bit about Delta Lyra. It's also part of a cluster called Steph 1, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So that's an interesting area of sky to look at. And apparently there's some really faint galaxies in there. I think out of reach of most of the refractors, that we have, unless we're in a really dark place. But in a larger scope, you might pick out, I think that, and there's a couple of little galaxies in there, some UGC galaxies. Maybe it was in the Sky and Telescope magazine.
Just looking at Stephenson 1
Yeah.
is the name of it. Yeah, it's right around. What'd you say it was around? Which star was that?
Delta Lyra.
Delta Lyra, Delta 1, Delta. No, that's the blue and yellowish stars there, I think, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah. There's some color in those. There's some color contrasts in that
Hmm.
part of the sky. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so then I think,
When you're doing your setup, Mike, because you were
yeah.
talking about sort of hitting some of the brighter stars first, you do a culmination there, like you do
Oh yeah,
your
the
optical
collimation. As soon as I set the
alignment.
scope up, even before I put the finder on, I take out the that Hotech. It's a basically 2 inch. It's kind of, you could use it in an inch and a quarter scope too. It has both parts are integrated into it. Anyway, so you put that in, and it's got a red laser. So you put it in, and it has a compression ring on it. So you don't actually secure it in with your focuser or your eyepiece lock on the draw tube. You just
Hmm.
you compression ring. Once you have that fully open, it basically puts pressure all around the device into the tube so that it really solidly maintains the center of the light path. So it stays right in the center of the light path by using this little compression ring that's integrated into that Hotech collimator.
Yeah,
And
it's a great design, and
it is.
for fast Newtonians, like those little margins of error, like if your collimator is just off center, and you collimate to that point, you're not going to have as good of a view. So, like, I think it's important just to stress that for anybody that maybe wasn't aware of how important every little micromillimeter is when collimating a fast optical system like that.
That's true. I find that collimator, you can use it, and providing the scope hasn't been, the primary mirror hasn't come loose or something like that, or things haven't rattled around. I think if you use the scope more frequently, you can collimate it pretty quick, but it takes almost no time at all. Like
Mhm.
less than 2 minutes, you can have that scope collimated, ready to go, and it holds collimation. The whole observing session for however long, 2-3 hours, doesn't really change much, and you can see the evidence of the good collimation. Especially when the sky is fairly decent. You see nice round stars. And the faintest stars are these little tiny points of light, and there's even when you go in and out of focus, you can kind of test your optics by going in and out of focus to see if it flares this way or that way. And collimator eliminates a lot of imperfections, certainly.
Mhm. I always like you had that, or you've had that 12-inch or a Orion 12-inch for quite a while.
Yeah.
And you and I both had 12 inches at the same time because I had the Meade light bridge, and I always thought that the Orion version was way better designed because the Meade light bridge had 3 truss tubes. I think your Orion has 4,
Yes.
and the locking mechanism was far greater than the Meade. And your telescope's, like you mentioned, ability to hold collimation for the whole night was far superior to the Meade. So I
Such a
always,
solid scope. And he went out of business, and
yeah,
I'm sure that Meade sold a lot of those light bridges because the price was pretty reasonable,
yeah, yeah.
and of course there was nothing wrong with the optics or anything. Maybe a little bit light on the design, especially for a larger you know, and even Orion, before they came out with that truss knob, which is kind of like a combination tube and truss.
Mhm.
They used to just sell a solid tube. So if Meade had put out that 12-inch light bridge with a solid tube, it probably would have been a lot better. just
Yeah.
for that fact alone,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that is a good scope, and it is the second one I've owned. When I bought that 15-inch old Tektron, which is still a project, and I have a new mirror cell for it. Okay.
Oh, did you get it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've
Oh,
had the mirror cell for a while, and I did get the back of that scope apart, and so basically it was basically a solid piece of plywood on the bottom of the scope that had kind of a sort of mirror cell attached to it, but there was no adjustment, So I didn't use it for such a long time. Anyway, so I got the bottom off, and it's gonna instead of that bottom piece of plywood, I'm gonna install this mirror cell. So I got to drill a few holes and put a little bit of flat black paint on some of the surfaces. So it's in the garage. I've got it on a workbench, and I'm sizing things up, and trying to get it just right. But I got to spend some time to actually finish it. It used to belong to Mark Bratton, and I think Mark had it, from the early '90s, and he used it almost, I think, exclusively while he was doing his own extensive observing while he was writing his book, The Herschel Objects.
yeah, the complete guide to the Herschel objects. If anybody's interested, by Cambridge University Press. I think we all have a copy of that signed and
Yeah,
delivered.
And listeners should be interested in it because it's a great book.
Yeah, it
Even if
is.
you're not going to do the full Herschel list, like it's a wonderful reference of some of the best NGC objects. So everybody should have that
yeah,
one.
I don't think there's another book quite like it on the market for the Herschel objects. It's got lots of detail, and of course, Mark's notes about about observing each of those objects. And many of his own sketches, which are
Yeah.
great little sketches. There's also some photos of some objects, but yeah, he goes through it by constellation, kind of numerically, in sequence, and yeah, it's handy to have either at home or even out in the field to just look up some reference points about certain objects you might be considering looking at.
Yeah, and you bought that off him when he upgraded to a 22-inch f3.6 or something to that effect, and he built a unique observatory around an A-frame. The sides of the A-frame roll apart, kind of like a mini version of a giant observatory. But yeah, a neat telescope though. So you hope to get that running maybe later this summer?
Yeah, I think I probably won't be ready until the fall. And I'm thinking of bringing it up to where I get it done and put it on top of the hill. It's going to work way better. So I think the only problem I had with that scope is I wasn't able to collimate it, and I did try to use it a few times. I think I took it out to. I thought, oh boy, I'm gonna put this scope through its paces out there. Couldn't collimate it, and that lack of ability to collimate just made it unusable. It's a big truss scope too, so it doesn't hold collimation. You have to collimate it every time you set it up, of course.
15-inch f5, I think it is.
Yeah, that's a big scope.
It is. It's pretty heavy too, and so I think this what I'm doing to it will make it a little bit lighter because the mirror cell is pretty lightweight, and with that big piece of plywood off and some other pieces off the bottom. The only concern I have with changing that is I wasn't 100% sure it wasn't going to match up with the focal length. But even before I did this, I was considering shortening the truss tubes a little bit because some things I couldn't get enough in focus. With this mirror cell being up inside it's kind of moving the surface of the primary up by almost 2 inches. I won't have any problem with in focus, but I might have a problem with out focus.
Easier to add extensions rather than try to
Right. So I think
reduce
it'll
your
work.
optical path. Yeah.
Yeah, and if it doesn't work, then I'll have to modify it again. But
Yeah.
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 So anyway, that's a good side project. And meanwhile, I've had this 12-inch for a long time. And when I did buy that 15, I sold the 12-inch that I had, the Orion 12-inch. And then since that 15 became kind of unusable, we noticed somebody was selling exactly the same telescope, a 12-inch XX, 12 Orion scope, with a bunch of other little accessories for a fairly reasonable price. I just had to drive up to Craig to get it, which is about 200 clicks or something like that, 150 clicks from here. So I got that, and I used it quite a bit, and I had to buy some of those bearings where the main bearings on that Dob rotate on. They're kind of small, hard plastic bearings.
Sort of Teflon pads or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the main bearings sit on.
Yep.
They kind of got worn flat, and actually I think one of them broke. So I had to buy some replacement parts from Orion. So luckily they were still in business, and the only way they would ever sell them to me is if I could show them my original bill of sale. So I showed them my original bill of sale for the scope that I did buy directly from them through, and they sent me the parts I wanted. Oh, plus that scope blew down one time. Okay, so this is the replacement one. It blew over. I had it covered with a scope cover. During the night, of course, the wind came up, blew that scope over, and kind of pushed the focuser into the upper cage assembly a little bit.
Oh,
So I had to take that apart, hammer out the upper cage. It's all metal, and hammered it out and put the focuser back on, and it worked fine, but it was ugly as heck. Right? So
Where was that incident? Where did
that
that
happened
take
at
place?
East Block.
I might have been there. Like I have a memory of this for some
Yeah.
reason, but yeah,
I think you were there.
Yeah.
It was not a good thing. But so I actually ordered a upper tube assembly from Orion, reasonable price, came with a focuser. I think I sold the other focuser to one of the guys in the club here who needed one. He was the guy I sold my original scope to, and he needed another focuser because he wore out his focuser. I sold that. I sold a finder. That's one of the things about that scope. It's equipped with a right angle correct image 9x50 finder, whatever. I hate them. I don't like those right angle finders.
How come?
I just find them hard to use.
Okay. Yeah.
And I prefer straight through. And I have a couple of Telrads. I think one of them is like in new shape. The funny thing about that scope, that 12-inch scope, the size of the secondary cage or the upper cage assembly is just a little bit too short for a Telrad.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's just
That's too bad.
maybe 1/8 of an inch too short.
Huh.
So of course it's got these cast steel rings on either end, and then the metal in between. So you can attach something to it, but the Telrad is a little bit too big. So I just have to fashion something to, that surface flat all the way where the end rings don't stick out to cause that Telrad not to fit. So I have to put a Telrad on there because I think a Telrad would be better than even that racy finder.
Yeah.
And I do like a finder, but not a racy finder, not a right angle one.
Yeah. When I had the Meade, I really I had both Telrad and the right angle racy.
Yeah.
And probably used the Telrad 75% of the time.
Right.
It was just nice to get the thing pointed at the right spot, and then usually at that time I think I was running a 35 millimeter Panoptic, which provided enough of a field of view that the Telrad usually got me in the zone, and then you sort of fine tune it from there at the eyepiece.
Right. Yeah. So a bigger wide angle eyepiece can be your finder.
Really. Exactly. Yeah. And
I always like the right angle correct image. Maybe I'm different here, but
well,
I
I did too on the light bridge, and why I liked it is when I got the field, if I had to continue to star hop, at least through the RACI finder, I was able to like just look at the field of view, look at the star map, and it all aligned, But if I'm looking
Right.
through the eyepiece, then I got to turn my map upside down, and I don't know, my brain just had a hard time
uh,
processing the everything,
mental
backwards.
gymnastics at
Yeah.
2 a.m., right?
Yeah. So,
Mm.
I
so I
get
did
it.
appreciate the finder, but
Yeah.
what I found is the optical quality of a lot of those right angle
Oh
races
yeah.
for $100 are
They're
not
not good.
great. Like the outer 40% of the field is so aberrated that it's almost unusable. And so it wasn't the best, but it served a purpose at times.
Yeah, I had the old University Optics. I had a brass one, and it was really good. And then but not perfect, and you couldn't use a lot of different eyepieces in it. So that's when I set up this permanent setup. That's why I set up the Borg 54 Achromat and put the old University Optics Misi Prism on it, and it works really good. But what I like is I like to see the object in the finder, where sometimes it might be large and dim, and I don't have the power dialed in properly in the main scope, and then kind of go back and forth because sometimes I'll just leave like 22 Nagler in there. But if I'm trying to look at something like M83, for example, it might not even be visible except in the very lowest power, like with a 40 millimeter Pentax or a 32 millimeter or something. And once you increase the power, you're just magnifying it out of existence. So
Mm.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think for your setup, that finder you have on your scope, really complements the use of your main scope very well. Plus you've got the go-to and tracking and stuff like that. So with that, doing fine tuning with your finder is a little bit more intuitive. When you're doing it the hard way,
I don't do
it's a
anything the
little
hard way.
different. And I just tend to do things the hard way.
Yeah.
You know, that night that I observed last on Thursday, I didn't even use any star maps. I had star maps available. I just referred to my the ones that are in my head. You know,
Oh, I've seen those.
yeah. Anyway, I went through a number of. I didn't really look at a lot of objects, but I wanted to see the Saturn Nebula because I could see Capricornus rising, and of course, the Saturn Nebula is in Aquarius, but it's just right above.
Right on the border.
To
Yeah.
find it, you find a Capricornus, and then it's pretty easy to find,
Mhm.
actually. So I observed that for a while, and I tried to see in some photographs. Of course, those photographs are probably like 1,000 power or something like that, but
Yeah.
it does have those extensions, those
The
ANSI that they call it,
ANSA, yeah.
which makes it similar in shape to Saturn,
Yeah.
but it really doesn't look like. Well, actually, with Saturn with its rings edge on, the Saturn Nebula actually looks a little bit like Saturn when
Yeah.
the rings are edge on. I couldn't really see a lot of ANSI. I think the transparency was good, but the seeing wasn't quite as good as.
Yeah, you need good seeing for that.
Yeah. Anyway, I observed it for a while, and I went back and forth from 60 to 140 power or whatever, 132 power. I didn't really bump the power higher than that. I could have put a Barlow in and tried it, but it just didn't seem like the seeing was good enough to start pulling more eyepieces out of the case.
Mm.
Mhm.
But I did observe it for a while, and I could see that it had these little protrusions where the ANSI are supposed to be. Certainly not any extension, but just a little bit of a bump on one side and the other on that object. And
Hmm.
it's kind of big and bright, so you don't really need a whole lot of power to actually see it.
Mhm.
Um,
Were you using a filter on that, Mike?
I did. I tried it with the O3.
Mhm.
Okay, and I think the O3 helps to see a lot of detail in something like the Veil Nebula or something like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
But for some of these brighter planetaries, it doesn't really enhance it much. You know, um, I tried a ultra high contrast filter on it too, and it didn't seem to make a big difference. So I left the ultra high contrast filter in for a bit because it certainly darkens the background
Hmm.
sky, behind the stars.
Mhm.
But and I scanned around with that for a bit, but I ended up taking that out too. And I don't know, the I think the use of filters is kind of like it's very specific, and of course, all these objects, you know, respond to filters a little bit differently. So it's certainly always worth trying. If you're trying to tease out a little more detail or something on some planetary or nebula or something like that, or even some things are just very visible without a filter, like say the California Nebula. I can't really see it without using an O3 at
Mm.
all. So yes, so I do try filters, but I they're only like a small part of the observation is in my experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking at the Veil Thursday night, and I did not have a O3 filter. And in the 90 millimeter Borg, I was able to see it naked eye, but just barely. Like it wasn't really jumping out at me. And I put the only nebula filter I had is the Teleview Nebbuster or Nebustar. We're not really sure how to say that one. Basically, a UHC filter,
Right.
and it did nothing on the Veil. Like it basically looked the same as it did without a filter. It didn't
Yeah.
really enhance it at all because the Veil really responds to an O3 really
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, the O3 is sort of hit and miss with a lot of other nebula. And I swung over to the North American, and I barely detected that without a filter. But when I put the Neb Buster in there, it really popped. Like the UHC really helped
Mm.
bring that one out. So kind of interesting. I didn't play with the filters too much that night, but a little bit.
But yeah, they're good to have, just to try on things, and of course we learn which filter in our kit works best on certain objects, like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
O3 on the Veil, and
yeah.
but on some of those bigger objects, say like the North American Nebula, or uh, you just need a dark sky, really, I
You
think.
do. Yeah,
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 yeah. That's the best filter.
yeah,
Just get a dark sky.
yeah. Exactly.
Um, I've seen those Ansei before using my buddy Peter Becure's 25-inch
Mm.
f47, and yeah, we had a really good night at a star party there, the Starfest back in this would probably be almost 17 years ago. Well, I guess, yeah, like my last year there. And wow, it was amazing. Like he had it set up so that you could sit and observe. And it was like the perfect height so that it was just like sitting in the reclining lawn chair looking up 30, 35 degrees in the sky,
Mm.
if that. And but you're looking through the telescope through 25 inches of aperture with, I think I had my just a Nagler something or other in there that Peter had, and probably was like a 9 millimeter Nagler or something, and I could see like not just like the feature of the Saturn outline, but I could detect like different brightness levels in different areas of those Ansei. It was just amazing to see.
Yeah,
Yeah,
25
there's
inches would
some
be nice.
yeah, there's
Mm.
some complex structure in that, like in I think in the Deep Sky Guide of Interstellarum, it has a photograph that's like at 1100 power, and it shows the ANSI with kind of like um, larger ends on them, kind of like a bulb, and then some of that kind of spirograph type structure within, and looking at it at say 100 power, 150 power, it looks like a bright planetary, and it's just a bright object. It's obviously non-stellar, and it doesn't take much to detect that it's not a star. Even at 60 power, you can see that it's a disk. It looks like a planet, but those, I think any kind of photograph at any kind of like high power is going to show you a little bit more. And of course, with like you said, like a 25-inch scope, Chris, you're going to see, whatever the sky is willing to give you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. So what else did you look at?
Well, I looked at M72. I think it's M72.
The globular?
M73. Yeah, it's a
70,
globular.
73 is the double, I think.
Yeah, 73 is like a group of like four unrelated stars. It's
Yeah.
not really an object. But M72, I looked at some stuff in Ophiuchus, so I could see basically the top half of Ophiuchus. So I looked at M14 for a while, and most books that describe M14 say none of the stars are resolvable, but there's in a 12-inch, there's a few resolvable stars in there, especially around the outer edge of it, and it's a fairly big object. It's like out of the Ophiuchus globs. It's not the biggest, but it's certainly an interesting one. It's kind of big, and it has it's not super bright, but it does have some very distinct individual stars around the edge of it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't really see M10 or 12 because my trailer was in the way. And there was a light on the other side of the trailer that I was blocking. So I had a nice dark spot, but I couldn't quite see down to the horizon. And even with the seeing, stuff around the horizon was tough to detect. So I didn't really stay around. I kind of stayed up in that, above 25 or 30 degrees, and didn't even get really to the zenith or anything. But one object I looked at that I don't think I really eyeballed too much before was NGC 6633, which is like an open cluster.
That's up in Scutum, or
it's between. I think it's on the Scutum side of the border between Scutum and Ophiuchus.
Yeah,
and it reminded me of the Leaping Minnow in Auriga.
Oh yeah,
looks a little bit like that, only it's pinched in the middle. So
it's in Ophiuchus.
Yeah, the Leaping Minnow. You could call the Leaping Minnow a shrimp. You could compare it to a shrimp. And this 6633 has more shaped like a crayfish or a lobster. But yeah, there's quite a few stars in there. It's an interesting little object to look at, as far as seeing, on a imperfect night, even though the sky was nice and clear. Those kind of objects are pretty rewarding, on any clear night, like an open cluster.
Yeah, for sure. That's close to Melotte 186 as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah.
That's a neat part of the sky.
It is. What else did I look at? I looked at, every night I'm out, I'm going to have a look at T Corona Borealis to see if there's any change in its brightness. But, since it's been like 80 years apart for that thing to brighten, it's really not due to they call it the blaze star. It's really not due to brighten again until maybe 2026.
It's gonna go, Mike. I can feel it. This is gonna be the year. I've been ridiculed for being overly enthusiastic on this.
I think it'll be next spring before that thing goes.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Get your hopes up.
Yeah, exactly. Blink and you'll miss it. Anyway, I looked at M92 and M13, and of course that galaxy near M13, 6207. So yeah, even at say 130 power, and I get about a 1 degree field, you can still see both M13 and 6207 in the same field, which is, it's always neat. That's a neat little galaxy. What else did I look at? I looked at Altair and Terra Z and that Barnard's Dark Nebula B142 and B143 through the telescope. I wanted to kind of zoom in on it, and it's amazing how dark that part of the sky is there. It's really incredible. So I've looked at it many times. You can see it in binoculars. You can see the whole thing, of course, but to zoom in on it with the scope, interesting, because right at the edge of that dark nebula, there's also some, bright or, some clusters of stars that, really show the contrast. Looked at the Ring Nebula for a while, and it's just another big, bright planetary. It's not quite as bright as the Saturn Nebula, and it's, of course, that donut shape, that ring shape is pretty apparent. Not sure I could see the central star, but I could see a star that's right at the outside edge of it, Then there's some other faint stuff up there too, but I don't.
Well, and depending when you're looking, it's pretty high overhead, which, gets to be a little awkward with the telescope and, eyepiece and everything. It just,
Yeah.
I was going to look at some stuff there Thursday night, but I just figured, I'll look into some other spots because I just hate looking straight overhead.
Yeah, I don't mind if I can get it. I didn't bother looking at anything in Cygnus, but I think Lyra was still, more a little east of Zenith, but at that time. And then, of course, I looked at M31. There's so much detail in that galaxy. So I can look at it with binoculars. You can see the whole thing. You can see M110 and M32. It's almost like a 3D effect looking at that galaxy or a group of galaxies. And then I zoomed in a little bit with the 12-inch, and some of that brighter stuff in that galaxy, like NGC 206, it's got its own designation, and there's lots of other stuff in there, but 206 was readily visible, to look at some details of the shape of it and the brightness variations on it.
Yeah, there's it's a wonderful galaxy to spend time on and to, put some power on it and see what you can see within the galaxy, because there is so much detail there.
There's a lot to see there. It's a pretty interesting object to study for a long time.
Yeah.
I don't think I didn't really look at much else, There's that little group of galaxies between Cassiopeia and Andromeda, which is like NGC 278, 147, and 185 that I've looked at many times before, but I think that night I could only see the brightest of them, and I think the brightest one is the more compact NGC 278 and 147 and 185. The lights, they're bigger, but the lights kind of spread out a little bit, and they weren't quite as apparent, but that one galaxy was. So I like looking at galaxies. I like seeing the different shapes of the galaxies. Different times of the year, some of those. There's some other galaxies up there off, Alpheratz, I think, that part of Andromeda. But I didn't really go through the entire list, but I just looked at a few things, and I think I packed up at around 2:00 because I was traveling the next day. It was a good night.
Yeah, it sounds like it. You were able to get through a lot of different things and
yeah, no, it was
good
fun.
conditions too.
Yeah, and just by myself, So
yeah. Did you see any aurora that night, Mike?
No, I did not see any aurora.
Okay, yeah, I saw a little bit from East Block. Some pillars were popping in the north and were pretty active. Not super bright, or I would say maybe from the horizon they went up about 20 degrees.
Huh. So you were in East Block on last weekend?
Just on Thursday night.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I had the whole week off, and I was planning to go to Grasslands on just the best weather nights for 2 nights. But like in years past, like even last year, I could book an Authentic, any of the weekdays and get as many nights in as I pretty much wanted.
Right.
But I think with like the free passes for national parks this year for Canadians,
Oh, yeah.
They're just busier. So the Authentics were pretty much all booked up, and I could only get one night in there, and it happened to be Thursday night, which was, it was great. The conditions were good, and it was a fun night.
Nice. Yeah, it was. The sky was pretty good that night, I thought.
Yeah, agreed. And the temperatures were good, and the wind was almost non-existent, so it was good all around.
Yeah. The only other night I had out at the park was about 5 nights previous, like it would have been Sunday or something like that. And the sky cleared off. I think I sent you guys a shot of the sky late in the day. But as soon as it got dark, or as soon as like twilight started, the dew, the humidity was so high, the dew was just making everything wet. And,
wow.
I had set up the scope and I just basically took it down again right away because everything was just getting so wet.
Yeah.
The dew. Yeah. So anyway, had one good night.
Yeah. Well, that beats no good nights.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. There's some objects. I think the only other observing I did, was probably when the moon was up a couple of weeks ago or 3 weeks ago or something like that. And I was looking at, it was a bunch of different craters. And I set up my refractor in the backyard, my little TAC 78, and was looking at the moon, and you could spend all night looking at the moon, on a night like that,
And you don't need the aperture either. Like a little 3-inch refractor is a wonderful instrument for that. Yeah,
exactly. So that's about the only other observing I did since, during July, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we're starting to gear up, for the good season to start, right? Where, it's not cold yet and it's getting darker earlier and the nights are longer. And I'm hoping we can get some good observing in August, September, and anything after that is a bit of a bonus, temperature-wise.
Yeah.
So
I'm planning to go to the Saskatchewan Summer Star Party at the end of August, or I think it starts on the 20th. I like to do that every year. Even if we get 1 or 2 good nights down there, it's great. But other than that, I don't know. Might try to get out if there's a good night.
All right. Well, that's a great observing report, Mike. Shane, do you have anything else to add?
No. Good talking to you, Mike. Haven't seen you for a while,
you.
So
You bet.
Appreciate you coming on, and look forward to some observing hopefully later this summer with you.
Thanks. Yeah, me too. Talk to you again soon.
All right. Dear listeners, please subscribe, share the show with other stargazers and send us your show ideas, observations, and questions to actualastronomy@gmail.com.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. If you are interested in more information, would like to contact us, or if you would like to support the podcast, check out our website, actualastronomy.com.